Arcadian Vanguard presents The Wrestling News in your daily wrestling newscast for Thursday, October 3rd, 2024. Good morning, I'm Mike Sempervive. We begin today with a report on All Elite Wrestling's new media rights deal, which was officially announced yesterday. The deal calls for AEW to remain with Warner Bros. Discovery with a 3-year term and an option for a fourth, and WBD paying AEW $170 million per year, which includes TV rights fees and other elements according to Sports Business Journal. Dynamite and Collision would remain on Wednesday and Saturday nights respectively, although Rampage does not appear to be part of the deal. Dynamite and Collision are also planned to simulcast on the Max streaming service starting in January and also be available on demand. Additionally, AEW pay-per-views would become available on Max at a discounted price at some point later in 2025. Said Tony Khan, quote, "This extension continues the tradition of iconic wrestling events broadcast on TBS and TNT, while also establishing a new legacy for AEW through its weekly live streams on Max for years to come. We thank David Zaslav, Kathleen Finch, and everyone at WBD for their tireless support of All Elite Wrestling since its inception, as well as the AEW fans, talent, and staff that helped make this possible," end quote. The Sports Business Journal also confirmed that WBD does have a partial ownership stake in AEW, although the specific percentage was not provided. 2 serious injuries occurred during the Ring of Honor tapings prior to last night's 5th anniversary episode of AEW Dynamite at the Peterson Event Center in Pittsburgh. Sammy Guevara was knocked unconscious in a match against Serpentico after attempting to execute a cutter on Serpentico as he was coming off the top turnbuckle and Serpentico landing on Guevara's face. AEW medical staff came down to the ring and initiated concussion protocols on Guevara before he was taken out of the ring on a stretcher. Earlier in the taping, independent wrestler Kelly Madden was also knocked unconscious during her match with Lady Frost during a spinning move coming off the ropes that was reportedly meant to be the final spot of the match. Madden was also tended to by the medical staff and taken out of the ring on a backboard. AEW presented its 5th anniversary episode of Dynamite later in the evening, broadcast live on TBS. In the main event, AEW World Champion Bryan Danielson retained his title against Continental Champion Kazuchika Okada in 31 minutes and 39 seconds. Okada's title was only on the line for the first 20 minutes of the match. After the bout, Danielson was attacked by Pac, Jon Moxley, and Claudio Castagnoli, with Wheeler Yuta making the save and declaring he'd be teaming with Danielson against Castagnoli and Pac on next week's show.
Claudio! Pac! I am sick and tired of the two of you treating me like a child. I'm not a child. I am my own man. I can make my own decisions, and I can fight my own fights. And speaking of fights, next week, Title Tuesday, if the two of you want to get to Bryan Danielson, you're going to have to go through me too.
In the opening match, Ricochet and Will Ospreay battled to a no contest thanks to outside interference from Konosuke Takeshita. The match had originally ended in a double pin draw, but Tony Khan ordered it to continue. MVP introduced his former Hurt Business associate, Shelton Benjamin, as his newest AEW associate during a backstage segment. Jay White made his return to television during the show, saving Juice Robinson from an attack by Hangman Adam Page after Page had just defeated Robinson. In other results, Private Party beat the Iron Savages, Britt Baker tapped out Serena Deeb, and Mark Briscoe agreed to defend his ROH World title against Chris Jericho at WrestleDream. And in ratings news, NXT's debut episode on the CW scored the network's highest 18 to 49-year-old demographic rating for the year, coming in at .26 according to WrestleNomics. That was also up from last week's final USA Network rating of .19. The total audience for the show was 895,000, the show's largest audience in a year, and up nearly 45% from last week's audience of 620,000 on the USA Network. And before we leave you today, we'd like to remind you that however you consume your content, you can find the wrestling news 24 hours a day and 7 days a week across social media. On Twitter, follow us at Wrestling News AV. Our Facebook page is also Wrestling News AV. The Wrestling News can also be found on the Arcadian Vanguard YouTube page. And for those who utilize Amazon Echo devices, just tell Alexa to play the Wrestling News podcast. And remember to make sure you add podcast at the end. Once again, for daily updates, breaking news, and more, follow the wrestling news across social media. And that's the news for today. If anything happens, we will be here to tell you about it. No clickbait, no paywall, just the wrestling news. The Wrestling News is a division of Arcadian Vanguard, and the Wrestling Newscast is a production of the Arcadian Vanguard Podcast Network.